So, welcome everyone to this episode of our Career and Industry Insights podcast. We are joined today by another two guests. So, I'm going to get straight into the introductions and then we'll get into the meat of the podcast itself. So, my name is Dave Jarrold. I'm the I'm not. I'm the skills development consultant here at Edinburgh Napier. Everybody else is a careers development consultant. So, I'm getting confused. I'm going native. I'll pass on to my colleague Kelly to introduce herself.
Yep. Hi, I'm Kelly Dawson. I am a career development consultant at Edinburgh Napier, and I work with students and graduates in our School of Computing Engineering and the Built Environment.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Duncan, can I come to you next? Ask you to introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about who you are, my quiz show host, who you are and what you do.
I'm Duncan Reid. I'm the owner of a managed service provider here in Edinburgh called Icelantic. We've been going for 24 years, have 24 years of 31 engineers, and we look after small to medium-sized businesses across Scotland who can't afford their own IT department. So we do outsourced IT from everything from pubs, restaurants, hotels, through to lawyers, accountants, factories, and such like it. They break it, we fix it.
Excellent, quite a varied client base, I would imagine.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's one of the things that is attractive in terms of working at an MSP, is it is very kind of fast-paced. Every day is different, wide variety of users and clients. So you're using similar technologies, but in so many different use cases. So it's at the kind of sharp end of using your IT skills.
Excellent. I'm sure we'll dig into that more as we get into the podcast. And Martin, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
I'm Martin. I am an Agile coach now, but I've had experience as a backend developer. I've worked in everything from startup to a corporate, so I've just got a wide range of knowledge of different kind of sizes of teams and different experiences in terms of what drives a startup versus what drives a corporate. Hint, it's whatever the customer wants when you're at the startup and however you keep it stable when you're a corporate. Yeah, that's me. Agile coach now, so that's kind of my career path.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. So a really interesting and diverse range of experiences and skills on the panel today. So really looking forward to getting into it. I'm going to kick things off, guys. And what I'd like to start by asking you about is your impression of what the kind of big ticket items are at the moment. What are the big challenges, opportunities that are really live in the industry or in your particular business at the moment? And Duncan, I'll come to you and kick off with that. So what's the big ticket issues for you at the minute?
I think the big ticket issue for us is finding the right people. There is no shortage of work out there. IT is an ever evolving, both in terms of more and more businesses are using more and more IT and using clever IT, and certainly with generative AI really beginning to come a hot topic in the industry. We see more and more clients wanting to do cleverer things with IT. So big problem for us is really getting the right people. In our particular line of work, we need people who are good at speaking to systems and good at speaking to people. So finding those engineers with those soft skills is absolutely key. And yeah, I would say that's probably our biggest challenge.
I will absolutely be coming back to that factor later on in the podcast, because you've hit right onto one of my areas of my particular soapbox and my hobby horse and the area that I'm most interested in. So we will come back to that. So from your perspective, Martin, what are you seeing as the kind of big tick issues or the main opportunities or challenges in the sector?
Well, I'm gonna echo the need for people that can talk to people. I am personally quite worried as an agile coach. Part of my job is to make sure that everyone can interact and that the team is functioning in a healthy way for the team members. I'm very concerned that with the return to remote, or like the general kind of trend towards remote, it might be the return to the old way of software engineers, sat alone in a dark room, not talking to anybody. That scares me. So certainly my line of work, we do a lot to try and make sure that doesn't happen. And because we went through a great phase of having people in being in offices isn't always great either for software engineers. Sometimes you do just need that silence so you can just focus and crack on with some work. So there's definitely benefits to both sides, but I would hate it if people return to being just antisocial code monkeys stuck in a dark corner, you know. But the other thing I would say is there is a drive right now, and I think it might be financially motivated, but towards people that are more cross-functional. So full stack developers or managers that can also do a bit of code, that kind of thing. As the industry in general is downsizing, like across the board, you see news every couple of weeks that a big company has laid off some staff. So as the industry is generally downsizing, you see more and more job ads for people that can do a couple of different things, maybe the full stack, like I said, maybe do a bit of code and be a manager, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably being open to being a full stack developer, not just focusing on one area. It's probably something that people would need to think about moving into the market.
That's really interesting. Like I say, from our students' perspective, when they're looking at their start, is they're thinking about the skill set they're going to be needing to develop, and it's interesting that it might not be a single kind of route, route A for their skills development, but there might be a number of elements that they need to bolt onto that in order to have successful options as the career goes forward.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll say back in my day, so it's about 8 years ago, but still, I was a back-end developer. Like I started as a back-end developer, so I did APIs. As we moved forward, and as we moved into more agile, I started tagging on a bit of web as well. The reason that I started doing it is because it's great if you can keep all of those like the whole product lifecycle within one team. So if your team doesn't have a front-end developer, or if maybe they're too busy, it's great if you can do that little bit of extra work to just keep the product ownership in a team. Like I said, now I'm seeing a lot of job adverts that just want full stack because they can't maybe afford to just spend money on a back end or just spend money on an individual developer.
Yeah, I would kind of echo what Martin says at the flip side of the coin. We're at the different end of the kind of scale. Martin's obviously speaking about software development and coding. We're very much at that infrastructure type level and the more functional side. But certainly coding is something that is a really important skill, an increasing skill within my team, the ability to produce things in PowerShell and Python and automation of fixes, automation of scripts, and that ability to write code, even in an environment quite traditionally nuts and bolts and hardware, software servers, routers, and so on. Coding is a really important skill that I would say over the last 5 years has become increasingly important to see on a new engineer's CV.
That's really interesting. And you guys are brilliant because you're already moving us into the next phase of the next set of questions. So it's going to be a seamless transition, Kelly. If you want to take us into the skill side of things.
Yeah, I think that's the smoothest we've been in a podcast yet into the skills question. But so yeah, I guess Duncan, I'll stay with you just because you've started talking about it there. What would you say is the most in-demand technical skills? So would one of them be coding, would you say? And
I'm going to sound really old school here. The most important skill I ever look for in an engineer is networking. Whatever we do, whether it's writing code, whether it's fixing a piece of hardware, if it can't speak to other parts of a system, it's pretty redundant. And I think that's a skill that's often overlooked. So we see engineers coming out with just really basic networking skills, but really understanding how a network's put together. Again, show my age here, but if you don't know what those ones and zeros are really doing, you don't really understand what you're doing. So I would say networking, coding, certainly from what we look at, that kind of system admin skills, those, being familiar with how Windows or Linux works, being familiar with where the different layers of the operating system are, where to find things, why an event, event logs are important, and that type of technical, like knowing your onions when it comes to a Windows or Linux server, a desktop operating system, a switch and a router, having those basic foundations. When you layer up to say, I need to learn this particular application, or there's a new product by Microsoft, they're all built on fairly solid foundations. foundations. And I suppose the other one really increasingly is the same set of skills, but without a piece of physical tin, but understanding the same concepts, but when it's applied to a cloud. So how does AWS put itself together, and what are the core services? How does Azure and Microsoft 365 work from the building blocks? Because once you know those building blocks, you can build anything.
Oh, that's great. That's great advice. And Martin, from your side, most in-demand technical skills?
I don't think this counts as technical, so I'll quickly get it out of the way, but that's writing code for people. The understanding that the code you're writing, it doesn't matter what variables the compiler doesn't care what you've called something. It doesn't care what your like variables are named. But understand that you're working as a team. Other people do have to read that. They do need to be able to understand what you wrote. So yeah, writing code for people. But I think the most in-demand technical skill right now, and I'm going to build on Duncan's building blocks here, but it is AWS as well. It's DevOps. We would refer to it as DevOps. It's knowing what things like Kubernetes are, knowing what AWS is, knowing how infrastructure works, because more and more infrastructure is code, as Duncan kind of alluded to in his line of work. More and more what our code runs on isn't a big lump of metal in a warehouse somewhere. It's virtual, eventually on a big lump of metal in a warehouse, but it's virtual for as far as we're concerned. So you spec a lot of that out as code these days. So yeah, knowing how that works in addition to your just general coding knowledge.
Oh, that's great. And I think students will be, really pleased to kind of hear that, because when they're writing their CVs, they're often saying to me, what should I put into my skills section? Because they'll have quite a lot of different technical skills, but what should they prioritize to be shown employers in their CVs? And a lot of the time it's, trying to pick out these key technical skills. So I think that will be really good for the students to hear.
Yeah, well, in general, if you say that you're an engineer, we're going to assume you can write code. And as long as you know a few basic building blocks of code, we're going to assume you can probably learn any modern language. They're all fairly similar. If you know how to Google, like, what is an if statement in Python, you can also Google what is an if statement in Java. And you're probably going to understand both of those.
I was just going to add, in terms of the CV, sometimes what's really good is that kind of crossover between education and industry. So if students are looking in terms of like, how can I get a little bit ahead? Some of the very basic industry qualifications, an MS 900 from the Microsoft to show an understanding of cloud, some of the CompTIA ones, both in terms of general IT, security and or networking. It's a bit of an independent badge that says, yes, I've got a degree from a great university like Napier, but I also understand some of the practical challenges which industry are facing. I think that's a very powerful CV when you can combine the academic record with maybe just even one or two, even if they're fairly basic ones. It just shows an appreciation that you've thought about translating academic learning into practical application.
Great. That's great advice.
That's really, really useful. I'm going to circle back and pick up on that again, or Kelly will pick up again that in a moment, Duncan, because when I think about what makes students stand out, and I think you're right, and building on what you've done is useful. Before we go into that, I want to build on the skills section a little bit. And Martin, I'm gonna come to you first, but because you've already mentioned it. An area that I focus on and an area that Napier's keen to support students in the development of is those soft skills, core skills, human skills, call them what we will. And especially in some of the technical disciplines like computing and engineering, people get sometimes overly focused on the technical skill to the detriment of the soft skills. So I'm really interested from your experience, and you've already alluded to it, on looking at what are the key and the core soft skills that really make a difference to back up people's technical skills in their careers.
Yeah, so I'm going to open with leave your pride at the door. We do something that you'll hear quite often in the industry is a pull request or a PR or a code review. Like, all these things are fairly interchangeable, but it is very common. And I would actually say it's bad if they don't do it, but you will get other people looking at your code before it gets released or before it gets merged into the main branch. If a company doesn't do that, then they're maybe being a bit lax. But that means that somebody else is going to critique your code, and they're going to have opinions, they're going to have solutions. In a perfect world, they aren't critiquing your code in a like, oh, I would have done this way. They're critiquing it in a, oh, this could be improved, or this could be better. And if your first response to that is, no, it can't, it's my code, I did it great, that's not a good stance. You're not, they're not attacking you. They're trying to look for ways that the code could be better for the betterment of the team or the org, or how the code runs, or how the thing works. So that's got to be the first big thing. And also, as I said, as I mentioned earlier, writing code, knowing that you're writing code for people. You might think you've done a really smart one-liner. The code does something really fancy. Ask yourself if you're going to remember what that does in a year. Ask yourself if anybody else is going to be able to understand what that code does even in a week. Is it going to take them more time to understand your code than it would for them to just rewrite it or fix the problem? Coding isn't an individual task, it's a team task, it's a company-wide task, and somebody else needs to be able to maintain it. So it's all that. It's just understanding that what you write isn't for you, it's for everybody else. And that goes, sorry, I might be rambling, stop me if I am.
No,
that
not
goes,
at all.
It goes into other things like if you're writing tickets or job specs, make sure that you give enough information that somebody else can pick that up. And in terms of communication, it's things like having your webcam on. I know a lot of people don't like that, and a lot of people, it took a long time for some people to get used to that. But being able to see people smile or nod or react, it's a human interaction. And as an agile coach, that's my bread and butter, is promoting human interactions and promoting teams working well together as human, as people. You're not just individuals doing a thing, you are a team. And I want you to be one amorphous blob, really. I want you to be a team and not individuals at all. That's my goal.
Yeah. So what I heard there was sort of communicate loud and clear was communication in lots of different levels, but also
Yes.
openness to feedback as well, and be hungry and willing to take feedback on.
Absolutely. If I'm looking to employ a new engineer, I'm not really looking at what their code is right now. I'm looking at what their code could be. I've done quite a lot of interviews at this point, so I know I kind of can get a feel of if you're going to be receptive to growth, and that's more important than what you can do right now. Because, and I don't mean this in any derogatory way, but what you can do when you come out of uni is nothing compared to what you can do about 2 months into the job. You learn so much, you ramp up so much in the first couple of months. You need what you've done at uni. I went to Napier. It was an amazing building block, and it definitely got me through the door. Just the general skills that I learned. And then the first 2 months, you just build so much on that. Once you just start running and doing real world stuff, you do need to be willing to learn and progress. And
it's almost
like I
that
said,
difference between sort of passing your driving test and then being out and learning to drive when you're out solo and hands on the wheel. I'm seeing you doing quite a lot, Duncan. What's your take on the soft skills? Is it a similar kind of perspective?
Also, I don't know if this is a 4-hour podcast or not, but I could probably go on about soft skills.
We can do an after hours version, because I could do exactly the same.
Probably one of the most important aspects. One of the things that we often say is we hire on attitude, not on skills. Like, I can teach anybody skills, but I can't teach somebody attitude. So some of these soft skills are really kind of vital. So echoing on what Martin said, I would say communication. Absolutely. Communication, both verbally, written, and as Martin indicated there in terms of the documentation, you've got to be able to communicate with clients, and clients are people, and you have to understand the client, whether your client's another internal IT user, whether they're somebody who's sitting in an external company who doesn't know anything about IT. You've got to learn to be able to summarize what you're doing. I think Albert Einstein once said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't really know it. And sometimes we have to treat our users like that. They're not impressed by acronyms and big technical words, and you're not there to prove you know the most technical things in the world. You're there in as few sentences as possible to try and say, this is the problem, this is what I'm going to do about it, and this is when you can expect things to be working. Doing that within the team as well, as Martin was indicating there, you're part of a bigger unit. So being able to communicate well with your teammates and to be able to do that in a way that inspires cooperation rather than kind of battling it out to see who's got the better tech is never productive within an IT or kind of coding company. Being able to write good emails. I think sometimes I see techs really struggling to understand how to condense. I mean, we talk in marketing about the 3-line email as being the holy grail to try and get sales. I think a 3-paragraph email in terms of how to summarize a problem or an issue to a customer or to a manager. Um, Personal organization, time management. These are some of the skills that I often see people come along and they have no idea how to organize an inbox, no idea how to make a to-do list and to put it against a calendar. And it's perhaps skills that people acquire in the workplace, but seem to be over the last 5 years, I would say we've run more internal courses on how to do personal organization. And I just wonder if that's something that maybe is missing in that university experience in terms of there's an assumption people know how to use categorizations, flags, folders, and all sorts of things to actually, because when you're in the workplace, you will be absolutely bombarded by information streams. And some bad news for students out there, we still work in a world with email. So being able to organize those type of multiple information streams, and you will be hit by Teams messages, emails, phone calls, tickets, managers coming over and interrupting you. So understanding how to personally organize yourself and organize deadlines. Being able to document what you've done, really important, as Martin said, both in terms of code, but in ticket notes and in guidance and documentation. You've got to be able, almost like scientific experiments, you've got to be able to reproduce the work that you've kind of done. People have to understand what you did and why it made sense. And probably the last thing I would say is a sense of pride. Take pride in yourself, pride in your appearance, pride in your technical work, and pride in the company that you're working for. They're going to be giving you a chance, so kind of show them that you're hungry, show them that you're proud to be one of their engineers, show them that you're at the very start of your proper IT career and you want to approach it with that kind of ferocity and energy that's going to propel you into the kind of super ranks. I think when you just graduate, just kind of turning up isn't enough.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a quote from one of our other guests said, "Hunger shines through," and I love that. I thought, yeah, it really, really does. And it's amazing how much of the themes of the conversations we've had have flown through. So we've talked to surveyors. We've been looking at a whole kind of gambit of careers and industries that connect to School of Computing and Engineering, the built environment. So engineers, computing, surveyors, as I say, built environment. And very, very similar themes coming through, and it is about those human skills, and it's something we're working to promote that development at Napier, and so it's great to get that endorsed by you guys. So I'm going to use those quotes when we're then promoting this on to students.
Yeah,
as you said, it's the hunger, it's the desire to learn, it's the desire to progress.
Yeah, if you give us somebody with that right attitude, and as Martin says, you're leaving university and you've proved you've got a technical aptitude to consume and use information, but you're pretty green in the industry. So you're kind of a starting block, but with the right attitude, we can take that and kind of almost weaponize your IT. But without that attitude,
Yeah.
as I said, if you're not willing to kind of learn, if you're not willing to be kind of mentored. And I think that's one of the other things. I know one of the things that we're going to talk about is what do we look for in a candidate, and I think really important, your candidates need to think about what do they look for in a company, and I think interviews really need to be a very balanced thing. So I'd encourage students to think about, where are they going? Is that place going to offer mentoring? Are they going to offer a career development, or are you just going to be kind of cannon fodder in a bigger machine just to spit out lines of code, and in 5 years' time realize you're still at the kind of same place?
So I'm going to run with that slick segue into candidates, Kelly, and let you pick that part up, because Duncan's doing all the hard work for us.
Yeah, so the next question, and Duncan, I'll stay with you just because you've kind of started down this path. So what is your top tips for, for students, and how to, stand out when it comes to the very competitive kind of graduate market? What would be your top tips for them standing out and just strengthening their applications?
I suppose there's two sides to that. One is the CV. You've got to grab somebody's attention in the first place. And if you're lucky enough to be picked for an interview, there's that kind of stage. So in terms of the CV, don't overpack it. If it's just lists and lists and lists of skill sets, that can be a bit hard to kind of read through. Going back to what we said about the soft skills and about the communication, it's unfair. How do you sum yourself up on one or two sides of A4? You can't, you're a human being, but you've got to make an attempt. So how can you communicate that, yes, you've got some technical skills? Think of some applications. Talk about the project that you did at university. Talk about if you've done some volunteering experience, if you've done some customer service. Believe it or not, somebody's CV who says they've spent 3 years at Napier, but they've been helping out at the Tesco and Holy Corner. In my world, if you've been serving customers for 3 years at Tesco, that's actually quite interesting. That shows you've got customer service skills, shows you've dealt with customers in difficult situations and you've had to communicate. So don't leave those things out of a CV, but actually make sure you're kind of relevant. You're highlighting them. And I would say once you've got the CV, and do take advantage of CV clinics that are offered either via Napier, or I know a lot of industries, will get along and do some CV work. If you do get the interview, you've got 45 minutes, 50 minutes, use them. Turn up on time, research the company, look the part, show that hunger, and have some interesting questions. So know the company that you're coming to. Understand what are some of the projects they've done. Have a look at their LinkedIn. See some of the things that they're talking about. What's on their kind of website. Ask about what their career development options are. Ask what is a normal day or a normal week. Ask what are the last 5 hires that you did? Where are those people now? Get some interesting kind of questions. The worst thing you can do is turn up, say yes or no answers, and when we say, is there anything you'd like to ask us, people shrug and go, oh no, I'm not too sure. It's a daunting situation, I appreciate that. But you've got 50 minutes to really shine out. So why are you the most hungry person that we're going to see in that week for that job? What's going to be your standout?
That's great.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Duncan. Such good advice. I'm just like sitting there listening to it. It's so good. Martin, to add to that, your top tips as well, for candidates, looking for them to stand out, what would be your tips?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to have to give you more specifics into software engineering, because I just 100% agree with everything that was just said. That was great advice, and is exactly what I'd look for. I think maybe one thing that I would add, that I don't. It's a shame that I have to add it, but it's tell the truth and be honest. There's no point in trying to elaborate or just flat out lie about what you've done or what your knowledge is, because you're found out and it's going to be worse. I always appreciated a lot more the people when I was doing like screening calls or early stage interviews, the people that just said, like, this is what I think that means, but I'm not 100% sure, or look, I don't know that one. The people that then started trying to blag is fairly like, it takes me about 20 seconds to know that you don't know what you're talking about. And then I'll just make a note of that and go, well, this person won't admit that they don't know. And that probably just then meant I wasn't taking you further. Because if you're going to just start lying in an interview, you're probably going to keep lying when you're here. And otherwise, hunger. I guess more specifically towards software engineering, it's quite common to do live coding interviews these days. So knowing some, you usually get the choice of language unless you're applying for something specifically. So it's usually your call on what language it is, but making sure you know some basic kind of data manipulation techniques. Have a quick look online for some basic live coding questions, because odds are that the one you get asked will probably be on a list online somewhere. But knowing how to do some, knowing how to do those, and I guess do a bit of practice so you're not too nervous doing those live, because we know that you're going to make mistakes. That happens. But you have, as Duncan said, you have a very limited amount of time to show yourself off. So the less mistakes you can make and the more you can show off, the better.
Yeah, and you probably don't have an awful lot of work experience yet, and we kind of appreciate that. So think of other things you can tell us to make yourself stand out. If you've done some part-time jobs, if you've done some volunteering, these are really interesting things. If not, think about some of the clubs and societies at university you can go join, because some of them are, you might find you could join the Napier Whiskey Society, for example, and the person who's interviewing you might love whiskey, and all of a sudden you've got 5 minutes of rapport in the bag right there. If not, if you've joined like NUSEC or something, you've taken part in a hackathon, might not seem kind of in 10 years' time, these are things you'll never mention at an interview, but there's something you're bringing of yourself when you're lacking that kind of work experience and practical experience. It just shows us that you're switched on. And I suppose if we're going to have to spend 40 hours a day 40 hours a week working with you, we also look for somebody who's a wee bit interesting. You don't want to work with a robot. You want to work with a human being. So any little like facets like that that just kind of make you multi-dimensional. And as I said, at the end of the day, you've just got to stand maybe 1 inch taller than the other 7 or 8 people that we kind of spoke to for that particular job.
That's great advice, and really good for the students to hear as well about, from the part-time job side of it, because so many students will say to me, oh, I worked a few years at McDonald's, but I'm not going to mention that in my CV. And I could count, how many times it's
Oh,
happened so many
absolutely.
times.
That's it really shows those kind of soft transferable skills. I mean, hats off to anybody who's worked for a couple of years in McDonald's. That's a hard-working environment. You've got to work as a team, you're under pressure, you're doing it for maybe not the best kind of wages. You stuck in that for a couple of years, that shows loyalty, it shows tenacity, shows teamwork. Yeah, these are things, as I said, in 5 years' time, you'll not mention it, but at this point in your career, it's really important information. And compared to somebody who's not done any of that, then you're definitely head and shoulders in front.
I've thought for years that in the olden days people used to do military service. Modern days, I think everyone should do customer service. Everyone should have to do like a year customer service. Everyone would know how to talk to each other so much more effectively.
Yeah, I think just kind of circling back to the soft skills, and I think that's one skill that again is perhaps declining slightly, is the art of verbal communication. Being able, it's the one thing we have to kind of slightly hammer home slightly more into new recruits recently, is don't always send an email or hide behind a ticket update. You know, pick up the phone, speak to real people, as it were. So if you've been engaged in a job where you've had to speak to the public, that definitely gives us a little bit more confidence.
It's interesting. We talk about skills and we talk about attributes. And I think a lot of the stuff you've touched on there is about the personal attributes that that person's bringing. And your experience is almost regardless of what the experience is, it will speak to your attributes. And that's what you're evidencing with that. And that's what you're bringing through the door when you go in for that interview. So, yeah.
I mean, really, as Martin said, your graduation certificate says something about your ability to acquire and process and use information. And that tells us something about how you can learn and how you can apply knowledge, and that's important. That's one very small sliver in making somebody employable. It's all those other personal attributes. Are you a good person to get on with? Are you part of a team? Are you loyal? Are you honest? Are you hardworking? Are you somebody who wants to succeed? Those are multiple layers. So the certificate, the graduation, really important, because you know that's a big tick box that gives us something to kind of build upon. And as I said earlier, if you can supplement that with some industry qualifications and then tell us some interesting stuff that you've done, make yourself multi-dimensional and interesting, then yeah, absolutely. And then that point, you're almost switching the tables and you're really at the point of actually interviewing us. You want to find out, especially in Edinburgh and Scotland just now, there's, you know, you can pick and choose your jobs if you're the right candidate. So make sure you're picking the right companies to go work with. Make sure that you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. Is this a place you want to work? Does this have a nice feel? You know, am I going to get career development? Am I going to get mentoring? Am I going to get exposure to new technologies? And make sure, and again, those are the type of things that, again, if you're asking these questions, somebody like me or Martin is going to say, switched on person.
Yeah, you show interest. You're showing interest, and you've done that bit of research. You've again, it's going that extra mile and showing that you are committed to something. Like if you've done a different job or got that extra career certification, the same as just looking up the company. That's a really small thing you can do. A quick Google, 5 minutes, look up what the company does. They probably have an about us or meet our teams, that kind of thing on their page, and that just shows that you've put in at least a bare minimum amount of effort to want to be interested in this.
Yeah, I still remember a couple of recent interviews where somebody had obviously gone to our LinkedIn, looked at a post about a couple of recent projects, and when I asked if they had any questions, he actually referenced a project we'd done a couple of weeks earlier and said, "How did that project go? Did you have any learnings from that project?" And it was like, I still remember that interview. Really intelligent question. Really, I maybe they'd done 30 seconds of a quick look online, but you know what? That was a really good 30 seconds for them.
Brilliant. There's so much gold dust in this episode, guys. It's been really, really fantastic. Now, I've got one final question to bring us towards the end. So I'm going to get you to cast your minds back. And what I want you to do is share, if you were in a position where you could give advice to your 20-year-old self, what would that be? And Martin, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay.
Oh, that was a long time ago. I think it would be to be more, I guess, more diverse. I do think I specialized too early in what I was doing. As I said, I joined. I went out of uni, and I knew at that point that I wanted to be a back-end developer, and because that's what I'd done during my group project and stuff at Napier. I thought, yeah, no, this seems really interesting. What I think I should have done is still going, right, yeah, no, that's what I'm interested in, but also looked into some other technologies, being a bit more diverse, because it was definitely harder for me to start picking up from scratch other technologies whilst I was already committed to being a back-end developer, because obviously I had a full-time job doing that. So that was where the company was expecting my skill set to be used.
Yeah.
So I think yeah, a bit more diversity. But otherwise, I think my initial career path was pretty good, and I will say I've been lucky. I joined a very small startup, and they were great, and it was great fun. And I got to sit in that company as it moved from a startup and grew and grew. And it was incredible to see the growth and the differences as the company goes through those stages. And yeah, and I think I was pretty lucky, and the company cared enough to put me through training for Agile coaches and stuff like that afterwards. No, I think it was. I think in my experience, it's been pretty good. I think I just diversify more.
It's a tough question as well, because it's the law of unknown consequences. If you had changed something, you don't know what else would have happened. So it's
absolutely. I'm not a person that likes to think about having regrets, because everything that I've done, I've built upon, or I just see it as another step going forward. So looking back and saying, "Oh, I would have done this differently," is a bit of a challenge. But I think that is what I would have done differently. Is I would have done my learning earlier.
Excellent. No, that's really useful. Thanks, man. And for yourself, Duncan, your 20-year-old self, what would you be saying?
I'll go quite left field, and it's nothing about IT or careers, but I would say don't give up on fitness so easily. I should have fought harder to keep a hold of my 28-inch waist back then, but yes, as life happens to you, I think it's easier for me to look back and to say, yeah, do prioritize health and fitness. That there's lots of other things that kind of happen, but health and fitness are things you take with you throughout your entire life. So yeah, I would grab hold of my 20-year-old self and say, less fish and chips and more exercise.
You know what? I'm going to second that as well.
Words to live by. Listen, guys, I'll draw us to a close there, but just to say on behalf of myself and Kelly, thank you so much. That has been really valuable, and we know from the professional disciplines that we're involved in, the quality and depth of the information that you've shared today is absolutely invaluable, and I'm sure it'll be really well received by our students. So thanks very much for your time and for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.